Hello, kids. It's Mr. Worthen here. We are on to day 11 of Unit 2, and we're going on to solving absolute value equations. So you know these little bars, these vertical lines, those are the absolute value signs. And a quick review of absolute value. If I have the absolute value of 4, what absolute value is really talking about is distance from 0. So how far away is 4 from 0? 4 units. Well, likewise, the absolute value of -4 is also 4. So what happens when we start playing with absolute value equations is we've got to deal with both of those possible answers. So when we hit up any absolute value equation, we're going to have to do, and I call this case 1, case 2. You got 2 different situations that could happen. And in one of those situations, x could be +4. So essentially, I just rewrote this guy without the absolute value. And in the other situation, x could be -4. If I were to plug -4 into here, the absolute value of -4 is 4. So there are 2 separate answers here. Well, that one's pretty ghetto because there was nothing else going on. Let's get into a real situation. Okay, so I've got my absolute value. Case 1, case 2. The minute I see absolute value equations or inequalities, you'll get to those tomorrow, we're dealing with case 1, case 2. So case 1, 4x minus 18, whatever was in the absolute value, equals 30. Again, all I did was rewrite this equation, and I'm going to solve it just like I would any other equation. When I switch to case 2, still 4x minus 18, I didn't change the inside, but I do have to account for -30. So if I can get the inside of this guy to be 30, that's one answer. Or if I can get the inside of this guy to be -30, that would be my other answer. So now I just got to go solve 2 separate equations, just like we've been solving for the past what feels like a month. Isolate the variable. I got to add 18 to both sides. Bring 4x down. 30 and 18 is 48. Divide by 4. And I end up with x equals 12. That's one of my 2 answers. I got to come to the other side. Same process, but please note, I'll guarantee you some of you think the answer is going to be 12 and -12. And that does not work generally. 4x equals -12. Divide by 4. X equals -3. So my 2 answers are 12 and -3. And again, just like with any other equation, I could check by plugging those answers back in. You got 2 down below. Pause. Go do those 2, and then I'll talk especially B. B's got a little feistiness. Okay, so for A, if you set it up and solved correctly, you should have got x equals -4, x equals 11. Those are my 2 solutions. Well, when you came to B, if you got x equals -18 and x equals 12, good for you, but you got tricked. Because I'm going to check 12 just to see. And when I plug 12 into my equation, I've got to do the addition first. And I end up with the absolute value of 15 equals -15. Well, the absolute value of 15 is 15. And 15 does not equal -15. So that tells me my answer is wrong. Well, what the heck did I do wrong? Well, if you weren't thinking, you probably just did case 1, x plus 3 equals negative 15. Case 2, x plus 3 equals positive 15. The problem is, I should have stopped right there. Why? Will an absolute value ever be negative? And the answer is no, it can't be. The smallest thing that can ever come out of an absolute value is 0. I will never get a negative out of an absolute value. So what's my answer then? And if I would have seen this from the get-go, absolute value equaling a negative, that is never going to happen. My answer is no solution. So it's one of those things you got to be thinking about and watch out for as you're going. If you're not thinking and you're just going through the motions, you can cause yourself some anxiety. All right, well, what happens when there is stuff outside of the absolute value? I cannot go case 1, case 2 until the absolute value is by itself. So right now, I've got a negative 2 sitting outside of that absolute value. We will not distribute into absolute values, ever, ever, ever. Don't do that. So what do I do then? Well, let's get rid of it. How is that negative 2 attached? Multiplication. How do I get rid of multiplication? I divide. So when I divide both sides by negative 2, I'm left with absolute value of x minus 3 equals 7. And now I have an absolute value equaling a positive number, so I can proceed. I couldn't just say, oh, no solution, because he's negative. That negative switched his sign. So now I can proceed case 1, case 2, x minus 3 equals 7, x minus 3 equals negative 7, solve, plus 3, x equals 10, plus 3, x equals negative 4. And I could go check that. Plug 10 in. 10 minus 3 is 7, and the absolute value of 7 is 7. Negative 4 minus 3 is negative 7, and the absolute value of negative 7 is positive 7. So that one worked. Go ahead and start C, give it a shot, hit pause. Make sure, hint, hint, you get the absolute value by itself first. So if you subtracted 5 to begin with, very good job. 8x minus 7, absolute value of 8x minus 7 equals 2 minus 5 is negative 3. And if you're not thinking, you're going to say, oh, case 1, case 2. But I'm thinking. And an absolute value will never be negative. Donezo. No solution. So again, these negatives, once you get an absolute value equaling a negative for an equation, no solution. Be careful though, because in lesson 12, you're going to be playing with inequalities, less thans and greater thans. And now it's going to get more complicated, so you got to think and be careful. Notice the difference between those guys. That's all I got for you guys. Get after it. Watch out for the negatives. Make sure you switch the sign of the answer when you go case 2. Take care, kids.